Good afternoon, boys and ghouls, ladies and gentlemen. It's your old pal, Morgus Rotten here, Dr. Morgus Rotten to be exact, and you found yourself on my slab, the Hellywood Slab. And we'd like it if you'd like, comment, and share, tell your friends about us, give us a little bit of a thumbs up, thumbs down, mid, whatever. Just interact with the video, please, because we kind of need the help, It puts us into the algorithm and tells people and tells us that you like what we're doing. Today on my slab is going to be Faces of Death 2026. Not to be confused with these Faces of Death, which of course have become cult classics and whatnot. This is a repro sold through Gorgon Video of the original, but this is an original Faces of Death 2, complete with the metallic label. What's kind of nice about the 2026 version is it reminds people how amazing these films are for what they are. Over the years, we've found out that, Faces of Death isn't exactly real. So there's a lot of BS going on there. And that's okay, though. I mean, if that's what you're looking for, it's what you're looking for. The search for the ultimate answer to life and death through the Faces of Death. Dr. Is it Alan B. Gross, I believe it is? Good stuff. The first two, great stuff. Three, it just kind of goes off the rails from there. The 2026 version is an interesting one. If you haven't seen it yet and you can't make it to the theater to see it, they put it out on Shudder, co-production between IFC and Shudder. And really, really, really kind of cool stuff. IFC's put out some amazing horror movies over the last few years. Late Night with the Devil, this one. There's quite a few others. You should check them out. But Faces of Death follows the story of a young woman who's had a personal tragedy in her life that happened on social media, making her somewhat of a celebrity, if you will, if that's what you want to call what happens to her. And so she ends up working at a place that would be like, TikTok, Instagram, whatever, that puts short videos. And she's one of the people who approves or denies the videos, depending on what's in the video. Obviously, if it's socially acceptable or whatnot, you obviously don't want to put up videos with nasty things happening to children or super violent, ultra crazy stuff, which you see anyway. But what happens is she comes across a couple videos that are, unbeknownst to her at the moment, recreating some of the death sequences from Faces of Death, the original movie. Unfortunately, in this particular case, it's not faked, it's real. And she tries to tell people, nobody wants to listen to her, and I don't want to go too deep into this because I don't want to spoil the movie for you, because it's a brand new movie, came out this year. Didn't exactly light the box office on fire, but I think maybe that's because people were turned off by the fact that, no, this is not a Faces of Death documentary. This is a film that recognizes that the Faces of Death documentary exists, and now you've got a killer running around trying to recreate the sequences for Faces of Death loaded up on the internet and try to gain internet fame. Personally, I thought that the casting was good. The acting was pretty decent. Dialogue is not horrible, which happens to happen with some of these, unfortunately, sometimes. But in this particular case, the dialogue's not too bad. It seems a little bit more realistic in some instances where the storyline is concerned, which is, again, a really nice thing with a modern horror movie, because a lot of the ones that I see these days have a tendency to kind of go out there on its own. It's a meta horror film, supposed to take place in the real world, kind of like Scream. But again, it's not done in a bad way. Music was good. I enjoyed it. The pacing is good. That's one of the things that really gets lost in a lot of these new horror films. The pacing just doesn't grab you. It doesn't have that movement of story and progression, character development. But in this film, it's all there. Is it a perfect movie? I don't know that I would say it's like a perfect horror film. As a slasher, which I think a lot of people are assuming this to be, it's not terrible. It's not, the stalker slasher like you used to, like Friday the 13th and stuff like that. This is more psychological. But again, it's not even a perfect psychological horror either. It's just a nice little homegrown B-budget horror film that I think really deserved more recognition than it got. So all of you that are expecting it to be like a Faces of Death documentary, this is not the film for you. But those of you that just want to see a nice little horror film that happens to be very loosely based off Faces of Death and gives the flowers to the original Faces of Death films, this is something you might want to see, because it's not bad. It's cool. I think it probably deserved to do better in the theater than it did. The fact that you can see it on Shudder now and see it in all of its blazing glory, I think is definitely worth checking out, especially in our social media lives that we live now. This is definitely a very interesting film because it does blur the lines between the reality that we live in and the social media that we all want to believe. I mean, are people going to believe what she thinks or what she thinks is happening? The way that people react to certain things, the characters react pretty accordingly to what I think would happen in real life if this was to really happen. So personally, to me, it's good enough and ends in such a way that I think a sequel would be warranted for this film. And I kind of hope that we get one because it's not bad. Dr. Morgus Rotten gives it a 3.5 ghouls out of 5 ghouls. And honestly speaking, yeah, I think it should be watched. Make your own decision. But yeah, just don't walk into this thing thinking that it's like a new Faces of Death documentary or a remake of the original film, because it's none of those things. It recognizes that Faces of Death existed, and even goes into the history of it to a degree, and uses it as a cornerstone to tell a new story based off of it. And in that respect, it's definitely effective and it gets to the point. So honestly speaking, boys and ghouls, check out Faces of Death 2026. It's a pretty decent little horror film, and on top of that, give IFC and Shudder a couple of your bucks so that they know that you appreciate this film and possibly want to see a sequel and maybe some more films from them. And considering there's such a bonfire of horror movies coming now, IFC and Shudder seem to put out some pretty decent stuff that's a little bit different than everybody else, and I appreciate that. And keep that in mind when you watch this, that you're going to get some higher production values and some interesting things going on, because that's kind of what they do. And in the horror scope, I think IFC and Shudder, and they've been doing this for like the last 6 or 7 years, putting out some pretty decent horror films with interesting ideas. This isn't a cliche on 2 legs. So yes, Faces of Death 2026, well worth your time. And like I said, 3.5 ghouls out of 5. See it.